Hi, I'm Dr. Rachel Zabana. I'm a pediatrician here at Hoag Medical Group at Foothill Ranch. Welcome to another one of our live stream presentations. Today we're going to talk about vaccines, myths versus science. So to begin with, it's a very simple question. Why do we vaccinate? Vaccines are made so we can prevent diseases that are caused by viruses, by bacteria. The ones we use against viruses are ones that are for diseases that we cannot treat, or once you're infected, we don't have very good treatments for, and they can cause long-term complications. The other types of vaccines are the ones we use against bacterial diseases, and those usually target serious infections that, even though we can treat, sometimes it's not fast enough, or some of these bacteria can be resistant to the antibiotics. So basically, it's to save lives. However, I know it is a hot topic these days, and there is a back and forth between should I vaccinate, should I not vaccinate, should I spread them out, should I delay them? And I think what's happening is we lost sight of what it is we're doing and why. So just a quick history of vaccines. Vaccines actually have always been a hot topic. This is not new, with people not wanting to vaccinate, people afraid of vaccines. This is actually one of the earliest photos from when they came up with the cowpox vaccine for the smallpox infections. And people actually thought they were completely sure that if you get that vaccine, you're going to sprout out cows, or you're going to turn into a cow, and that's what the picture is depicting. The little cows coming out when that woman is getting inoculated. And the reason for that is it is a little scary when somebody says, oh, I took some cowpox virus and I'm putting it in your body to protect you against something that you may or may not get. It is not an easy sentence to hear. And back in the day, nowadays, most of the vaccines, and pretty much all the vaccines we have, are pretty safe. We keep improving on them as technology gets better and as we know more and more. But yes, in the past, some of the vaccines did have serious side effects. So actually, the earliest group to oppose vaccinations was in the 19th century. It was in the, I believe, I'm forgetting I think 1870 something. And it was led by a woman named Mary C. Hume. And it was against this vaccine. But back in the day, there was no such thing as I'm going to refuse it. If the government wanted to inoculate everybody. In a way, that was good, because the smallpox vaccine was completely eradicated. We don't see it. We've never seen it for years. And I think the last case, it's going to come up in a minute. I'll show you. So there are different types of vaccines. I'm only going to talk about the vaccines that we're going to use, that we know of, that we have been using for a long time. And these are the childhood vaccines that we need for school and for regular. I'm not going to be talking about COVID today unless you ask, but in this lecture specifically, I'm holding off on that one. So what are vaccines? There's basically three types. One is the inactive vaccines, where you actually do not contain any live portion of the vaccine. It's just a little bit of a sort of a blueprint for your immune system to look at and create an immune response to. So you should not be able to make that infection. You should not be able to have that infection. Things like hepatitis A, hepatitis B, the H influenza type B, the pertussis vaccines, the injectable, the intramuscular polio, and the Prevnar vaccines are types of inactive. The live attenuated vaccines, they are live, but they are in such a weakened form that they cannot or should not give the infection. So it's basically taking out the most infectious portion, or kind of making the virus so dizzy it can't do what it's supposed to do. And it's the idea is to, again, present it to the immune system. The immune system looks at it, makes little notes to itself, makes some memory cells, so that we don't have to worry about that in the future. If we ever come across that virus, we can mount a response right away and get over it before we even, the goal is to make a response before you even get any symptoms. And these vaccines, the live attenuated, usually give you lifelong protection. You generally don't need a booster. However, we are living longer, and so sometimes this can change, and people who are immunocompromised, people for some reason can have their immunity wane over time. Those types of people may need a booster, but in general, you don't. These types of vaccines, the live attenuated, we do not generally recommend for immunocompromised persons. And these, you really have to be immunocompromised. You would know if you are or not. People on cancer treatments, they don't have an immune system. We actually, part of the treatment is to compromise your immune system to try to fight the cancer. People who are, let's say they have chronic autoimmune diseases and they are on chronic treatments, people who are receiving IVIG immunoglobulins, those people can't get those vaccines for many reasons. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but in general, there is a way to give it to them, but you'd have to work really closely with your doctor if they ever need it. But that's a different story. The toxoid vaccines are inactive bacterial toxins. They're actually trying to fight the bacterial infections. So they're actually targeting the toxins themselves, not the bacteria. So your body mounts a defense against the poison that the bacteria produces. And that is, tetanus is one of them, the Tdap and the DTaP, they're pretty much the same. So the whole point of the lecture, I'm going to try and focus not on a lot of details. It's more about what's happening, what's going on with what we're thinking. It almost feels like over time there's been so much information, and now we have the internet and everything's accessible. But the problem is everything's accessible, so you don't know how to sift through it. And some people, we may not be even talking about the same language. Scientists, doctors, healthcare workers, nurses, we are talking together. The parents are talking together, but I think there's a little lag between talking together about what's happening. Parents are getting fears because what they see online, they don't have a good interpretation of what they're looking at. When you're a first-time parent, you want to do your best, and your doctor's not next to you 24/7. The internet is, the blog is, the website is, your family is, and there's a lot of peer pressure and a lot of, everybody knows what they're doing. It's true, but you do need some guidance. And I don't know if I'll mention it, but I grew up as a sick child, and trust me, everybody had a cure for me. And I've been through it all. No, there is no such thing as a cure. In the end, I had to learn to talk to my doctors and go with the plans and understand what it is they're asking me to do and why it's important and how it's going to affect me for the rest of my life. So just as an example. But everybody has to go through everything. So the most important things, the most important comments that I've heard from parents and I've seen online when it comes to myths. There is a lot more than this. I just wanted to kind of shorten it a bit. So a lot of parents go, no, vaccines don't work. We don't need them. There's too many of them. My baby's too young for this. I don't know what's in here. You're going to poison the child. You're going to cause autism. These are very painful. It's a needle. And they can have side effects that I don't know about. There's some toxic ingredients, which I mentioned earlier. And some people do believe, there is a group of people that do believe that vaccines will kill you, or they will give you the disease on purpose. So why would you do that? And there are people who think, why would I do a vaccine if I'm going to get the natural immunity anyways, without the needle? I will talk about that. So this is what parents see when we talk about vaccines. They see this. All these needles jabbing their baby, baby's crying, baby's in pain. Why would you do that to a child? And this is why I want to do this talk, is because I want to show why we're doing that. Every one of those needles is about 0.5 milliliters, and I just wanted to mention that so you can keep that in mind, the quantity. So if you're a mom, if you're a dad, if you're a first-time parent, you look at that picture and this is all you're going to think of is, no, I don't want this to happen to my child. That's cruel. I'd rather talk to whatever the vlog, I called it blogs, vlogs, and other ogs, and talking to family and friends. And there is, of course, peer pressure everywhere, not in a mean way. Everybody's got their own way of dealing with everything. Everybody's got their own experiences, and they mean well. But sometimes they might sway you one way or the other when you should get a little bit more information before you make up your mind. So when you're talking to people and you see that picture of a crying baby, you're going to turn around and go, no, I want the natural way where my baby's happy and beautiful and there's fruits and vegetables in front of them. So let's go through a few of them at a time. So vaccines don't work. That is not true. And the biggest success story we have is the smallpox vaccine. We've eradicated, there is no natural living smallpox virus in the world since at least 1980. The World Health Assembly or World Health Organization declared it completely eradicated from the entire world in 1980. 1949 was the last outbreak of smallpox. Smallpox used to wipe out civilizations. It was that bad. So our biggest thing is, our goal is to actually get to that point where we get rid of all these viruses so we don't have to worry about them. But just to go back a little bit, when it comes to the smallpox vaccine, the first vaccine was actually in 1796. So we've had vaccines for over, I think I calculated this morning, 261 years at least. I might be wrong, I'm really bad with math, simple math. And it was by Edward Jenner. He was in Asia, and he was actually, there were outbreaks everywhere with smallpox. People were dying by thousands, by millions. And he noticed that milkmaids who were milking the cows never got, or most of them, were immune to smallpox. They didn't get it, but they used to get these little weird skin things, and that was called cowpox. And so he had this idea. He took their blood, examined it, and he actually created the first inoculation using the cowpox virus. And the first ever person to get the first ever vaccine in the world was actually a little boy that was the son of an aristocrat lady. I love history. And her name was Lady Mary Wortley Montague. And she was in Constantinople on vacation at the time. So she actually took that information, and she went back to England and brought the concept and the practice of starting vaccinations. And it used to be called variolation, which is something to do with viruses. Anyway, so the other myth is, instead of the vaccines, I'm getting it naturally. So I put that picture on purpose. The child on my left, I'm looking at the screen, I think you're right, with all of those little terrible looking lesions, that's smallpox, and that child went on to pass away. Their sibling got vaccinated, and he lived. So that simple 0.5 milliliter shot saved him. So no, it's not always better to get the natural infection. You can have and the other thing my parents always say, dying is easy, living with a disability is worse. So next thing, how do these vaccines work? Why are we talking about them? So in general, this is how our immune system works. And I have to say, I put the YouTube video website there because I really did like that video. It was so nice. It was so visually appealing, so simple to explain. I just couldn't figure out how to upload it, and I wanted to thank the person whoever made it because it was really good. So in general, let me see. You have in your immune system, you have cells that are running around looking for things, keeping you safe, looking for anything that looks foreign. When they come up to an antigen, the green little blob looking thing, they're gonna look at it and say, wait, this is something new. I need to figure out what to do with it. So they clone themselves and they replicate and they make pretty much like an army. And then that army makes specific antibodies, proteins that become antibodies specifically for that type of germ that they're staring at. So that's basically the weapon. And they fight it, they kill it, they trash everything, they clean up everything, and then of course when you're done, some of those cells will stay. They'll hang around and they will become like the guards, and those are the memory cells. Those will be around for lifelong protection, and their purpose is to be walking around your system looking for anything that resembles whatever they just finished fighting, because they don't want it to happen again. It's kind of like if you have a country, you're not going to wait until somebody invades you to go find people, to train them to be in the army and teach them how to use it and figure out the weapons and then fight that person. It's too late. They would have taken you, you'll be conquered, it's over. So what you're supposed to do, what we always do, is we have a defense system ready to go. That's the vaccines. We are giving you the information, your body's making memory cells, it's keeping it on the side for the future. It's basically guarding you, and we're trying to help it to guard a little bit better, more efficiently before something happens. And the reason we want to do that is because it's fine to wait until you see an infection and mount a response and you get better. Most of the time. Most of us get colds, we get miserable, we're sleeping in bed for a couple days, or even have a 24-hour flu. And we're fine because this system is still working. It's still going on 24/7. We just don't feel it because we've been exposed so much to so many things that you don't even feel what's happening anymore because you have those memory cells. But every time you see something new, your body's going to have that full response from the beginning, so you will feel that sickness. And the idea behind vaccines, again, for serious infections is We don't want you to go through that part where you get so sick, so severe, and then get better, because by the time you get better, you've already infected so many other people, and you've already damaged whatever it is that is targeted by that virus in your body, and you have a chance of getting long-term complications. And I don't want to make this talk very miserable. I wanted it to be more of a kind of like a lighthearted, this is what's happening in you, and this is why we're doing it. So the other thing is, well, vaccines have side effects. I don't want that. Yes, vaccines do have side effects, absolutely. Nothing is perfect. If somebody says this is perfect, you're never going to get any harm from that, this will work, this is a cure, it doesn't exist. Everything has something. The world is not static, it's dynamic. There's yin and yang, nothing is perfect. That's why that's the way we are, otherwise we don't move forward. So most of the time, the side effects are mild. A lot of people don't get anything, but some do. The most common things is sore, is an injection, it hurts, it's in the muscle, especially if you tighten up and you're scared, you're gonna get that soreness even more. You might have a lump under the skin, you might have some redness, some swelling, low-grade fever like 100, 100.4, but a fever that lasts more than 2-3 days, or it's like 104 fever, we need to know about it, because chances are that has nothing to do with the vaccine. You may have gotten exposed to something at the time of the vaccination. And of course, when in doubt, you ask the doctor, because we need to know. The other thing is some people do get some rashes, mild. Like with the MMR, a lot of people are afraid to get the vaccine because you're gonna get measles. It's not true, you're not gonna get measles. You might get a mild rash from a reaction, but it's not measles. The less common but more risky is some people have a risk of getting febrile seizures. Some people can have anaphylaxis or allergic reaction. They can have, I forgot the last one. But in general, these are very less common. I do have one family that I know of that truly cannot get the flu vaccine. I have to ask the ID person before I do anything, because they do have a family history of a genetic issue, and they can't. And I actually didn't believe it first, but then when I looked at the history of the whole family, I don't want to give too much information, but so things do happen, but I see 1,000 people a day, a week, of those one. So you have to think of the bigger picture. So if you have any questions, that's what we're here for, so ask us. And this is what we're hoping for. We want a healthy, happy baby smiling. They might be mad at you for a couple days and angry at you for the rest of the day for giving them the shot, but that's okay. What I did want to show is, yes, the vaccines give side effects, true, but guess what else gives side effects? These. And this is only 3 of them. I didn't want to put too many nasty pictures or scary pictures. This is not about fear-mongering or scaring people. I'm just showing this is what we're trying to prevent. So the picture with the 2 little boys with on the crutches, that's polio. Polio is an extremely nasty disease. It is a lifelong disability. I have an uncle who has polio. He actually, he comes, if I'm saying the story correctly, that's what I was told. It was a big family. They didn't have the money to pay for all the vaccines, and the one vaccine he didn't get, because he was the youngest, was the polio, and he ended up contracting polio. He's actually a doctor, and he has 0 non-vaccinated children at his office because he shows them the polio in his body. And all you need to do is just take one look at his legs, and you're like, no, thank you. But anyway, and again, that's not the reason you should be getting the vaccine, but it's just to understand what it is we're trying to prevent. Nobody wants this for their child. You worked so hard to make such an amazing baby, and you want them to be a productive, wonderful, happy, healthy, have a long life. So you want to do as much as you can. The one on the bottom with the large neck, that's mumps. Mumps is not just, oh, mumps, you get the infection here, you get the parotid glands all swollen. Boys can get sterile from mumps. And there's a lot more complications, but that's the biggest one that I wanted to mention. The one on the far left of the slide is measles, and that's not nice. Who wants their child to look like this just so that they can avoid 5 minutes of crying? Okay, maybe it's 10 minutes, maybe it's 15, maybe it's 2 days of being angry at you or cranky or have a fever. But would you rather have that or that picture of a child who has to go through this for 7 to 10 days, if not longer, with complications from measles? So instead, we do this, vaccines. So you don't even have to see those. We don't see these anymore. That's why it's hard for us to wrap our heads around why we still need vaccines, because we don't see these. The problem is it's hard to explain to someone why you need something when it doesn't exist anymore in your mind, because it does exist. We just kind of close the door on it so it doesn't come to you. So the other question is, the other myth is, well, vaccines contain toxins. I don't want them in my child. Well, not really. I just listed a few things that most people ask me about. There are a lot more, but in general, whatever's in the vaccine, and again, it's 0.5 milliliters. It's literally a drop. Well, maybe a little bit more than a drop. I think it's actually 4 drops makes 0.5 milliliters. Antibiotics are in it, yes. They are in there to keep it sterile, to keep it from having overgrowth of bacteria and contaminating the infection. Aluminum, yes, it's there. It is, and I actually looked it up specifically. Aluminum is there. If you take all the vaccines in the first 6 months of life, you're going to get a total of about 4 milligrams of aluminum. When you're breastfeeding, you get 10 milligrams of aluminum. If you're doing formula, it's 40 milligrams for the same amount. And if you're doing soy formula, which I know some of my patients like it, 120 milligrams of aluminum. And you're breastfeeding every day, and you're eating formula every day, and you're drinking soy formula every day. But in general, that amount, the reason for the aluminum actually is the aluminum is inert. It doesn't do anything. It's just it doesn't do anything to you. What it really does is it makes that vaccine that much more efficient. So it's actually helping to rev up your immune system better. And there's a lot more that goes on in making vaccines, including combos, and why combos are actually helpful. But I'm not going to talk about that. So, but in general, I just wanted to let you know, yes, everything has aluminum in it. Aluminum hydroxide, you probably, somebody at this point have taken aluminum hydroxide today. You know what that is? That's Mylanta. It's made of aluminum. So, but don't worry, it's not Reynolds wrap is what I'm trying to say. It is an inert molecule. We use it for a reason. It doesn't stay that long in your body. Over time, most babies will work that out of their system, and you'll only have less than 1% in your body that stays. It just goes out real quick. And over a lifetime as an adult, you can accumulate about 50 to 100 milligrams of aluminum from food. And again, if we're getting to the point where you're getting toxic effects from aluminum, it needs to be 100 times more than that. So again, I'm putting it in perspective, the amount. It's not the words, it's not the amount, it's why we're doing it. Mercury, we don't have anymore. It hasn't been in anything since the 1960s, so that point is moot. And I haven't had, thankfully, anybody ask in the last, I think, 5 years or so. Nobody has asked me about it. Thimerosal, we have vaccines that don't have thimerosal in it, so there, we'll take it out. Thimerosal was used for preserving the vaccines, but we have them now without it. I haven't found any information about fetal material and dead babies and all of these things. I have not found anything about that. And this is a side note, I could be wrong, but I don't see why somebody would do that. Some people think, oh, you're going to put a chip in my child. And everybody that's looking at me right now, guess what? Everybody can see you. You're on a computer. There's a camera. We know exactly where you are. I'm not trying to scare everybody, but if I wanted to find out where you are, I would just look you up on your cell phone. I can ping you and find out where you are. I don't need to put a chip in you. So no, I'm not trying to minimize everything, but you know, after a while, you hear all these things and they just play with your mind, and then you start worrying and you start questioning, and you need to ask the right person to get the right information. So I hope I wasn't being too rude or too like making fun of anybody. There are some more things in there, and one of them I think somebody at some point might ask me about with formaldehyde in vaccines. Yes, there is formaldehyde in vaccines. There's also formaldehyde in your body. We produce formaldehyde in our body, but we don't produce this much, and then there isn't this much in a vaccine. Again, it's 0.5 milliliter for every vaccine. So moving on, I might be telling but again, our goal is to make a happy baby. I put the website for the CDC about vaccine safety, so you can take a look and kind of go through them one by one if you'd like. So what's in the vaccines? We kind of talked about the things that people consider toxins. They're actually, some of them are called adjuvants, some are called residual traces, some are there for preservation, stabilization, and keeping it sterile. The active ingredient is the antigen. That's what we want. That's the part of the virus or the bacteria that we are aiming for to make antibodies against and protect ourselves. And of course, most of it is made of water. You gotta mix it in something. So the other things people say is, oh my gosh, these are too many and it's too soon. My baby's too small, he can't handle all this. Again, each vaccine is 0.5 milliliter, whether it's a combo or not. There is a variation. Some flu vaccines sometimes come for a child dose of 0.25, but in general, all vaccines are 0.5 milliliters. The oral vaccines are different, like rotavirus. There's two kinds out there that we use. One is 1 milliliter you drink, and the other one is 2 milliliters that you drink. But other than that, injection-wise, most vaccines are 0.5 milliliters each. So one thing a lot of people tend to do is, oh my God, they start counting how many vaccines the child's gonna get before they turn 11. And as you can tell, somebody, by 6 months, there's 45, and by 18 months, there's 64, and oh my gosh, by the time you're 4. Each one of those is 0.5 milliliter. If you count how many times you took amoxicillin and ceftonir and ear drops for an ear infection, count all those, that's a lot. That's a lot more than the 0.5 milliliters of each vaccine that you get. And the idea is the more vaccinated you are, the less likely you're going to get sick, the less likely you're going to go to the doctor, the less likely you're going to have ear infections, the less likely you're going to have ear tubes from chronic infections, and so on. So my point is, stop counting. It has nothing to do with the counting. The reason we have more is because we have more technology. We have more ability to fight these vaccines, to stop them, to curb them before they even hurt our babies. That's the point. So, and again, there are too many vaccines, yes and no, and we were just talking about it. So this is basically the recommended vaccine chart that we use, that most people use here in California and the US. And it's not a hard and fast rule. There is some leniency here and there, and those are the bars that you see that are long. It gives you the most effective time to give that child to protect them against certain infections that occur in that population is what we're trying to aim for. That's why we give those vaccines in that time period. It's not because they're too young and we just want to jab them. We want to protect them for whatever's coming ahead within those first few months of life until they mount a response, until they become mature enough to do their own, to come on their own. And even though there's a lot more vaccine, the actual total load that we put on the body is a lot less than the tiny little vaccines that we got when we were younger. And we got the ones that were older generation, the ones that used to give more side effects. Like, we used to do oral polio. Oral polio is known to give polio. You can get polio from oral polio. You can't, it's hardly ever, I don't think you can, from the intramuscular one. And I had to give oral polio when I worked in underserved areas outside the US. We used to go to small towns and let them know we are coming with vaccines, get ready. People would walk miles with kids all over them. I had this mom that had a child on her neck. She had the little baby in front, and she was dragging 3 other kids, and she walked from another town to come to us because we had vaccines ready for them. And I had to give them oral. I was so nervous putting that drop in the child's mouth because I knew somebody's going to get real polio from what I just gave them. I was petrified, but that's how important that was to them. It's whatever you can do to save your children. So you got to weigh what we have. And so, again, the idea is we are constantly improving on these vaccines and making them less and less irritating, and I guess people think they're dangerous. So we're making them making them more safe, making them more effective. And hopefully someday we won't need to jab anybody. Maybe we'll find a different way, like rotavirus. We drink it. The other one I was going to mention was the DTaP, the DTaP. We, in our generation, I feel so old. In our generation, I believe I did too. We took DTP. That little A is the reason people don't get pertussis from getting the DTaP vaccine. The DTP used to make people sick. But again, like I said, we're improving, we're constantly improving. So, and then PCV is the Prevnar. We used to do PCV7. Prevnar is pneumococcal pneumonia. It's against pneumococcal pneumonias. There are so many pneumococcal pneumonia types out there. We went from covering for 7 to covering for 13, but they cause a lot of recurring ear infections. They're one of the biggest reasons for kids to get chronic ear infections if it's the pneumococcal pneumonia. So for kids who don't get the Prevnar vaccine, they're actually at high risk of getting recurring ear infections. It can also cause really terrible pneumonia for kids, causing them to get hospitalized, especially when they're in the first few months of life. And the elderly, the other reason we vaccinate is not just to protect the baby. We're protecting grandma and grandpa from the baby who doesn't have an immune system and still try to mount a response when they get exposed to something. They're going to go with grandma and grandpa while mommy and daddy are at work, and guess what? They're going to cough on grandma and grandpa who are on some sort of medication, or just in general, their health, as healthy as they are elderly, their immune system doesn't work as well. So again, vaccines, we are trying to protect everyone. So again, vaccines overwhelm the system. It's too many. My baby's too small. And I wrote those on purpose. Yes, the baby is young. The newborns, the infants, the children, they have an immature immune system. How can you expect them to fight these terrible infections? They can't. You're not going to send your child out in the rain. You're going to put a raincoat on. You're going to give them the mittens and the scarf, and then you're going to let them out. You would never send your child out in the middle of the rain without protecting them. Same thing here. The thing is, you can't see the viruses. You can't see what they do because we don't see that anymore. It's hard to wrap your head around that unless you've seen it. And sadly, I have seen a baby with tetanus, and I will never forget the screaming that he was making because the pain of the tetanus was causing. Anyway, I hope nobody ever gets to hear that. These kids are vulnerable to these diseases. And yes, the number of vaccines have increased. We are giving more. But again, because we're doing combos and we're improving on the technology, the amount is less, the load to your body is less, but it's more effective. And yes, I put that last one in there because I get a lot of questions on that. Babies can still get vaccines if they come in with a cold. You come in on your well check, you have a little bit of a cold, it's okay. You can still get the vaccines. It's not gonna harm them. It's actually gonna boost their immune system. Same with antibiotics. You can. So the main, and I wanted to put that in perspective, the vaccine, 0.5 milliliters, every time you come in with an ear infection, I'm gonna give you at least 100 milliliters, 10 days worth of amoxicillin. Again, which one do you want? And the other question is, people say, well, there's enough people vaccinated, why should I vaccinate? The thing is, the more you vaccinate, the more you keep everything away. And think of vaccines as the raincoat. Think of herd immunity, where you vaccinate everyone, as the umbrella. As much protection as possible from the windstorm that's coming. And then again, we don't need vaccines. That's not true. For a while, we almost eradicated measles in the United States, and then people got laxed. And then we started separating vaccines, and then people were like, well, everybody's fine, why should I? By the time we were in 2014, the cases have gone up again. And in 2019, it's even higher than what it was before we vaccinated, which is really sad. And so, yes, childhood illnesses, I'm worried they're making a comeback. We see measles everywhere. Look at the park, Disneyland, poor Disneyland. They can't ask us for vaccinations, and it aggregates of people. And again, I don't like stats. I just wanted to show what it is that we're doing. With pneumococcal pneumonia, the Prevnar vaccine, Prevnar 7 was the first one we introduced, and it brought down disease a little bit. But then when we made the Prevnar 13, look at how over time it's pushed down the infections way, way down. IPD means invasive pneumococcal disease, which is the really bad one that you end up in the hospital and you can die. So this is why we vaccinate, to keep those numbers down. Not so much because we want to give it just because. I left all of these, this slide and the next one, for people who want to see the numbers. But our target is we want 80% of people vaccinated. It's better to be 90 to 95% if you want to do good, 100% good herd immunity, but we'll see. So who makes these decisions? There are 4 panels of experts that make these decisions for us of which vaccines and when and the timing and all of that. So the CDC does it. The ACIP is the Advisory Committee on Immunization practices. It's part of the CDC, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and the American Academy of Family Practice. And yes, there is a little bit of variability in vaccination schedule, which allows us a little bit of leeway, as you can see, because it is a lot of people's hands in the pot, but we try to make it as simple as possible and as easy as possible for everybody and as effective. I do encourage everybody to talk openly with their family and their trusted friends, and you don't have to argue about it. Just kind of, you know, it's kind of nice to debate anyway. But be mindful of what you're reading on social media. It's not always the right thing. It's not always good for you specifically. It may be good for somebody else. They are safe. They are effective. Our goal is the same. Everybody wants to protect kids. Everybody wants to protect their loved ones. I put a few websites there to help, especially the one on top, the CDC. It's a really nice website. It talks to parents about your visits, how to prepare for the visits when it comes to vaccines. And then I added this one, which I had on my last talk, but I put it in anyways because we are in the COVID world still and the pandemic. Don't delay your child's care. Don't delay their vaccines. Don't delay their well checks. We are equipped and we try our best to keep the virus at bay and still continue to take care of our patients. And these are our areas, our offices, and that's about it. Any questions? Ooh, we've got some good questions. Let's see. Okay. What's the role of titers in determining the need for a vaccination or a booster? Good question. So, for some people who can't get a booster or just want to know where their level of immunity is after exposure, after a certain amount of time, that's what titers do. They give you kind of a general idea of how much antibody you have, how much defense you have against a certain virus. For some people, and again, I'm going to use myself as an example. For some people who are immunocompromised, titers come in handy because sometimes you cannot have the live vaccine, so it's kind of nice to monitor where your immunity is. And but for other people, like people who are in healthcare, people who are going to college, people who are in sports, and you've had all your vaccines, but you're worried that you may not be as protected, or you want to know where your level of protection is. Yes, a lot of some vaccines and the immunity from vaccines can wane over time, like I said earlier. So that's one way we check. And that's another way of how the AAP and the AAFP and the CDC keep track. They constantly do testings and they constantly look at the levels, and that's how they determine when we need a booster and when we need 3 series versus 4 series or 2 shots only, and how far apart they are, because that's what they're doing. They're looking at how everybody's immune system works and how effective they can be. So, and that's where these things come from. But not everybody needs titers. I would not rely on, let me do my titers and I can avoid getting a vaccine. That, again, I'm not going to go out. I'm not going to take a child out in the middle of nowhere without a jacket if there's a storm outside. Even if you show me that it's beautiful and out and clear outside, I'm still going to put that jacket on that child. What is VAERS? So Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System. So again, part of monitoring and improving on these vaccines is looking at what can go wrong. Again, nothing is perfect. And when we first started with vaccines, it was a crude time, it was a trial and error. Everything is a trial and error. And not everything is perfect, and not everybody has the same reaction. And there are billions of people on Earth, so someone's gonna have some sort of reaction. It's kind of like the lottery. You just don't wanna win that one. So VAERS is a system where we document and we keep track of anything out of the ordinary. For example, serious side effects like, God forbid, death, maiming, febrile seizures, anaphylaxis, those kinds of things need to be reported. We need to keep track of them. And we need to find, it helps to go back and look at these and try to see, are these really truly from this vaccine, or was there something else going on? And that's why these vaccines don't just come on the market just like that. They take years, and they go through like a drill of, that's not a good word, a huge amount of evaluations and testings and retesting, and you do the same experiment over and over and over again before you even think about putting it out in public. The FDA is who we is the agency that will actually give the okay. And to get them to say yes is not an easy thing. You have to really prove to them what you did, how you did it. Is this ethical? Did you do it properly? Did you explain everything? Did you show us why you had these effects and why you didn't give a certain response? And and the diversity of the population you used when you came up with these numbers. There's a research does have, when it comes to vaccines and just in general, there are some bad things that have never happened, but since then, that's why we have the internal review board, that's why we have the VAERS system, because we are trying to track down everything. We're trying to make it as helpful, as efficient, and as good as possible. So, so if you ever think you had a really serious illness, you do need to report it, and they need to know, because they constantly check and recheck and improve. And it takes, I didn't mention it earlier, but it takes on an average, maybe 15 years before a vaccine actually comes to the public. And imagine it takes 15 years of testing and retesting. Imagine how many other vaccines never made it to the first phase of testing because it was deemed, nope, that's not good enough, that's too deadly, that's too awful, this is not working. So it's not like they put it out there just because. And the fact that we have that sped through the COVID vaccine, and again, I don't want to talk about COVID because I'm not an expert on it, but in general, at least from what I've read and from what I've seen and what I understand, is the reason we have a vaccine, one, is it's worldwide camaraderie. People from all over the world worked together and got their data together, and it actually helped because you have enough data as if you had waited 6-7 years, because you're getting it from different populations, different time periods, different ethnic groups, different parts of the world, and you're sharing the data. That kind of helps. But again, like I said, I don't want to talk, I don't know what the long-term effects of the COVID vaccine or the COVID itself, but that's a different story. But that's where we're at. Well, great. Well, I hope you enjoyed the lecture, and please let me know if you have any questions. And thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm Dr. Rachel Zabana. Have a great night.